There was a conversation I needed to have before my wedding. I knew I needed it. The knowing was quiet but persistent, the way a stone in a shoe is quiet but persistent. You can walk on it for a while, but eventually you cannot pretend it is not there. I needed someone to sit with me and tell me the true things, not the ceremonial things, not the faithful woman, faithful household things I had already heard 100 times. The true things, the specific, practical, honest things that lived in the gap between the life I had been preparing for and the life I was actually about to step into. Nobody sat with me. Nobody had the conversation. Not because the women around me did not love me. They loved me completely. But the conversation I needed did not exist in the language our community gave us for talking about marriage. It had been carefully, consistently, generationally left out. And the leaving out was so complete that most of the women who might have had it with me did not know it was missing. They had never had it either. My name is Sarah. I was 21 years old when I got married, and what I am going to tell you tonight is the conversation that Amish women never have before marriage, the one that gets passed over in silence, the one I had to piece together myself, alone, over years of living inside the thing I had never been told the full truth about. I want to start with why the silence exists, because understanding the why is the only way the what makes sense. In our community in Pennsylvania, the preparation for marriage was real and thorough in certain dimensions. Practical preparation, how to manage a household, how to cook for a family, how to preserve and mend and organize and sustain the daily life of a home. Spiritual preparation, the faith that was supposed to hold the marriage together, the ordnung that governed its structure, the bishop's counsel about the covenant being made. These things were given to us with care and seriousness and the full weight of a community that believed they mattered. What was not given was anything that touched the interior of the marriage, the emotional dimension of it, the psychological reality of what it meant to build a life with another specific person. The things that happened inside a woman, inside her mind, inside her sense of herself, when the life she had always known was replaced, almost overnight, with a life that was entirely new and for which the practical and spiritual preparation, thorough as it was, had not quite reached. The silence around these things was not accidental. It was structural. It came from the community's understanding of what a woman's inner life was and was not for. Her inner life was for God, for faith, for her family, for the community. It was not, in the framework I grew up inside, a subject for extended examination or explicit preparation. You did not prepare a woman for the emotional texture of marriage. You prepared her for the role. The assumption was that the role, faithfully filled, would produce its own peace, that the interior would follow the exterior if the exterior was done right. What I found, what I think most Amish women find, in the privacy of their own experience, is that this assumption is sometimes true and sometimes not. That the interior does not always follow the exterior automatically, that there are things a woman needs to know before marriage that the role cannot teach her after the fact. Things she needs to have been told, directly and honestly, by someone who has lived it. The first thing nobody tells you is about identity. When you marry inside our community, you do not just change your household. You change your name, your address, your daily companions, your kitchen, your morning rhythms, your place in the community's social structure. All of this happens within a very short span of time, and underneath all of it, quieter than any of the practical changes, harder to name, something shifts in your sense of yourself. The daughter you were is not exactly who you are anymore. The wife you are becoming is not yet fully formed. For a period of time that nobody prepares you for, you exist in between those two identities. You are neither quite who you were, nor yet who you are becoming. This in-between is disorienting in a way that the practical and spiritual preparation does not touch. It does not announce itself as a crisis. It does not feel like faithlessness. It feels like standing in a room where all the furniture has been rearranged and you keep reaching for things that are no longer where they used to be. A particular kind of lostness that has no name in the language of our community, because the community's framework assumes the transition is simply the arrival at your proper place, not a disorientation, a homecoming. For me, it was not a homecoming. It was both things at once, real belonging and real lostness, pressed against each other, neither one canceling the other out. The second thing nobody tells you is about grief. There is grief in marriage, real, legitimate, unacknowledged grief. The grief of the life you are leaving, your mother's kitchen, the particular rhythm of the household you grew up in, your sister's voices in the next room, the specific way your family moved through its days, the texture of it, the accumulated warmth of years of daily proximity that you did not know you were measuring until you could no longer reach it in the same way. You are supposed to be joyful. The wedding is a celebration. The community is full of warmth and blessing. And you are joyful. Genuinely, the joy is real. But underneath it, in the private quiet that comes after the celebration, there is also grief. And the grief is also real. And nobody tells you this because the framework does not have room for a woman to grieve on the way into her proper place. Grief implies loss. And how can the arrival at fulfillment be experienced as loss? But it can. It is. The two things exist at the same time, and both are true. I cried on the third morning of my marriage, alone, before anyone else woke up. Not from misery. I want to be clear about that. The same way I am always trying to be clear about the complexity of these things. Not from regret, from grief. From the specific grief of someone who has just realized how far they are from the kitchen they grew up in, and the voices they grew up hearing, and the particular smell of their mother's house in the morning that they will never again wake up inside of. I cried quietly, and I did not tell anyone, and I made breakfast, and I went on with the day. Nobody had told me the grief was coming. Nobody had told me it was allowed. I held it alone for months before I understood that it was normal. That it was not a sign of faithlessness or ingratitude, that it was simply the cost of transition, that every woman who had walked this path before me had probably felt some version of it, that the silence around it was not because it did not exist, but because the language for it had never been built. The third thing nobody tells you is about needs. In our community, a woman's needs, her practical needs, her emotional needs, the things she required to function well and feel whole, were supposed to be met by the structure, by the faith, by the community, by the fulfillment of her role. The assumption was that a woman who was living faithfully inside a faithful household did not have unmet needs. That need itself was a signal of something missing in the faith or the practice, something to be corrected rather than acknowledged. What I found in my first year of marriage was that I had needs, specific, real, completely ordinary human needs. I needed to be heard sometimes not in the context of a problem to be solved, but simply heard. My thoughts, my observations, my day, received by someone with attention and care. I needed, occasionally, time that was mine without being required to account for it. I needed to feel known by my husband in the way that took time to build and could not be rushed. I needed the relationship to develop at its own pace, rather than being assumed complete because the vows had been said. These were not dramatic needs. They were not demands or complaints. They were simply human. And in a framework that did not have robust language for a woman's interior needs, I did not know how to name them. I did not know if naming them was allowed. I did not know if feeling them was faithfulness or its opposite. Nobody had told me that having needs was not the same as having failed. That naming them was not Hotchmet. That a woman who knew what she needed and could say so clearly was not being proud. She was being honest. That honesty about your own interior was not selfishness. It was the beginning of the kind of real partnership that made a marriage more than a structure. I found my way to saying these things eventually. to Jonas. Carefully at first, then less carefully, then with the ease of two people who have learned each other well enough to be honest. He did not always know what to do with what I said, but he listened. And the listening was the beginning of something that the vows had promised, but not yet delivered. The beginning of actually knowing each other. I want to tell you the conversation I needed before my wedding, the one nobody had with me. I want to have it with you tonight, whoever you are, wherever you are in relation to the life you are building or the life you are preparing to build. Here is what I want to say. The transition into a new life, any new life, not only marriage, not only Amish marriage, will disorient you. The identity you carry into it will feel uncertain for a while. This is normal. The grief for what you are leaving is real, even when what you are entering is good. Both things are true, and you have needs. Real, specific, human needs that do not disappear because you have arrived somewhere you were supposed to arrive. They deserve to be named. By you, to yourself first. And then, when you are ready, to the person you are building the life with. Nobody told me any of this before my wedding. I am telling you now. I am having the conversation with you that nobody had with me. Because you deserve to go into whatever is coming with more than the ceremonial version of the truth. You deserve the real version, the full version, the one that includes the silence and the grief, and the needs and the lostness and the beauty, and the both things are true version that is harder to say and more honest than anything else. That is what I have for you tonight. That is the conversation we were never supposed to have. We are having it now.